I have always lived quietly, not because I had little to say, but because silence allowed me to see the world more clearly. My name is Ethan Harper, and at 34, I had built a life that looked simple from the outside. I owned a small investment fund that performed well, but I avoided spotlights and stayed far from extravagant circles. I traveled on the subway, lived in a modest loft, and drove an old sedan that rattled on cold mornings. None of that mattered to me. What mattered was Sophia Langford, the woman who taught me that love could turn even the most ordinary moments into something unforgettable. When I drove through the towering iron gates of her family's Long Island estate, I felt my heartbeat quicken. The view was breathtaking. Trimmed gardens, fountains sparkling under the afternoon sun, and a mansion that looked more like a museum. But beneath all that beauty, an uneasy wind blew through my thoughts. Sophia had warned me many times that her parents judged people not by who they were but by what they owned. I had laughed it off, believing love could soften even the sharpest hearts. Sophia placed a gentle hand on my arm as I parked the car. "You don't have to pretend to be anyone else," she whispered. "They'll see the real you." I smiled, but in truth, I saw the nervousness in her eyes. She knew the world inside that mansion better than I did. In her world, a person's worth was measured in wealth, history, and social position. I carried none of that, not in the way they desired. The front doors opened as we approached. Victor Langford, her father, towered over us with a face carved from years of authority. Beside him stood Eleanor, her mother, elegant and polished. Their expressions told me everything before they spoke. "So this is the consultant," Eleanor said, her tone polite yet distant. Sophia squeezed my hand, but I felt my confidence falter with each passing second. Victor shook my hand with the kind of grip meant to remind me who held power. We were led into a dining hall large enough for 20 people, though only 4 chairs were set. The tables stretched so long that I wondered whether they ever sat together with warmth or laughter. Dinner began like a formal interview. Every question aimed at me was wrapped in judgment. "What school did you attend? What do your parents do? How much does your business earn annually?" They shaped each question as though they were searching for flaws, not understanding. I answered calmly, remembering my promise to Sophia. But the air grew colder, thicker, harder to breathe. I could feel Sophia's embarrassment each time her parents exchanged glances of disapproval. Still, she defended me in small ways, subtle shakes of the head, soft comments, quiet sighs. Then the sound of the front door echoed through the hall. Everything changed. Blake Carrington entered with confident steps. He was dressed in a flawless suit that probably cost more than my car. He walked straight to Victor and Eleanor as though visiting his own family. Their faces lit up in a way I had not seen all evening. "Blake," Eleanor said warmly. "We were just discussing the future." Sophia stiffened beside me. The room now revolved around him. He greeted her with a familiarity that made my chest tighten. He had known her since childhood, but there was something unsettling in the way he looked at her, like she was a prize he had already claimed. Victor raised his glass. "Blake, join us. We have exciting news to share." I stayed at the far end of the table, feeling like a shadow. The conversation flowed easily for them, filled with plans, business dealings, and old stories. Whenever I spoke, silence followed, as if my words did not belong in their world. Toward the end of dinner, Victor stood, his voice echoing confidently. "We have decided," he said, "that the arrangement between our families shall continue. Sophia will marry Blake." Sophia shot up from her chair. "What are you talking about? That arrangement was cancelled years ago. Victor's expression did not change. This is what's best for the family, and for you. Sophia looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. I stepped forward, determined to speak, but Eleanor raised a hand. Your life is unstable, she said firmly. Sophia needs someone with a secure future. The words hit harder than I expected. They didn't know me. They didn't know the life I lived or the dreams I held. But they had decided I wasn't enough. When Sophia protested again, Victor signaled the guards. Before I could react, two men in black suits approached me. Their touch was firm but not violent. It didn't matter. The humiliation stung more than any physical force. Sophia rushed toward me, but Eleanor held her back gently, whispering something I could not hear. I tried to meet Sophia's eyes, but the guards turned me away. The mansion doors closed behind me with a dull thud. The night outside felt enormous and empty. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the estate where I had walked in with hope and walked out with despair. 4 days. I waited for Sophia to reach out. I believed she would fight, that she would come to me. Instead, a letter arrived, written in her handwriting, but not in her voice. The words were stiff, lifeless. Ethan, I am choosing a different future. Please do not contact me. I read it again and again, each time feeling the paper grow heavier in my hands. Then came the news. Sophia Langford engaged to Blake Carrington. The photographs spread across social media. She stood between her parents and her new fiancé, dressed beautifully, but her smile did not reach her eyes. Friends told me to move on. Some said I should confront her family. But I chose silence. I convinced myself that perhaps our love had been weaker than I believed. Perhaps I had misread everything. The pain settled inside me like a quiet echo that never faded. Months later, wedding photos appeared. Sophia looked delicate, pale, as if happiness had slipped through her fingers. People praised the match, calling it perfect. I saw only sadness. I tried to bury the memories, telling myself the story was over. But life has a way of revealing truths when you least expect them. And mine was waiting just beyond the horizon. A full year passed after the day I lost Sophia. I spent most of that time trying to stitch together the pieces of my life. I poured myself into my work, though no one knew the truth behind the quiet investment fund I owned. I had built something far larger than anyone imagined, but I never spoke about it. Silence had always been my shield. The pain of losing her did not disappear. It simply settled into the background, like a soft ache you learn to live with. I told myself I had moved on, but some part of me, deep and stubborn, still wondered what might have been if the world had been kinder. One stormy afternoon, as rain tapped angrily on my windows, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I froze. Victor and Eleanor Langford stood on my doorstep, soaked, exhausted, and looking years older than before. Their clothes were damp, their eyes red, and their posture no longer proud. They looked nothing like the powerful couple who had once dismissed me so easily. Ethan, Eleanor whispered, "May we come in?" I stepped aside without a word. The air felt heavy as they entered my modest loft. Victor stood near the window, rain dripping from his coat, while Eleanor sat gently on the edge of the couch as though afraid she might break it. "We owe you the truth," Victor said, his voice trembling. "And an apology." I did not respond. I waited. He swallowed. "We were wrong about you. About everything." They explained what had happened since the wedding. The company they cherished, Langford Global Imports, had begun collapsing. Contracts disappeared, debts increased, and trusted executives turned against them. And at the center of it all was Blake Carrington. He had taken control under the guise of partnership, only to quietly replace loyal staff and redirect profits. He had slowly tightened his influence over the company until the Langfords were left helpless, watching the business crumble. "Ethan," Eleanor said, her voice cracking, "we need your help." "Not for us, for Sophia." My heart tightened at her name. She continued. "She is not well. She is isolated. Watched constantly. We fear she has no one to turn to." Her voice wavered, but she chose her words carefully, keeping them within respectful boundaries, mindful even now to avoid revealing more than necessary. Still, the message was clear. Sophia's life had not turned out as the world had been told. She was deeply unhappy, and the Langfords feared for her future. Victor looked at me with eyes that had lost their arrogance. "You are the only person she ever truly trusted. And you are the only one capable of helping us rebuild what we have lost." For a long moment, I said nothing. The memory of that night, the humiliation, the rejection, returned with sharp clarity. Part of me wanted to turn them away. But then I remembered the woman who once held my hand under a sky full of hopes. The woman who believed in me long before anyone else did. I finally spoke. "If I agree to help, I take full control. Every decision. No questions." Victor nodded immediately. "Anything. Whatever you need." And so, within a week, I arrived at the Langford headquarters. The building that once symbolized wealth and power now echoed with fear, whispering through empty offices and uncertain employees. As the newly appointed leader, I worked with a focus sharper than ever. My team and I examined every corner of the company. We uncovered falsified contracts, strange financial trails, and decisions that made no sense until the pattern emerged. Blake had woven a web around the Langfords, and I began cutting through it thread by thread. Within weeks, the company started to breathe again. Old clients returned, hopeful investors reached out, and the financial chaos lessened. But my mind was on something else, or rather, someone else. Sophia. I could not stop thinking about her. I wondered if she knew I was back in her world. I wondered if she believed I had forgotten her. And worst of all, I wondered if she still thought I had ever stopped caring. As the company stabilized, I prepared a plan, not just for the business, but for her. I reached out to people who still cared about her well-being. I listened to accounts of her quiet sadness, her withdrawn nature, the way she moved through life like someone who had lost her light. I heard stories of her sitting in the garden alone for hours, tracing shapes in the soil with her fingers, as if trying to remember happier days. One morning, after months of work, I drove to the estate where she lived. The same gates that once felt intimidating now felt small in comparison to the weight in my chest. The guards let me through without hesitation. I walked through the garden, a place she once described to me in warm detail. She had told me how the flowers looked brightest in the late afternoon sun, and how she wished I could see them someday. That memory guided my steps. There she was. Sophia stood by a row of wilted roses, her posture gentle yet fragile. When she lifted her head and saw me, she froze. For a moment, time stopped. The wind seemed to hold its breath. The rain-soaked earth smelled like the beginning of something new. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I simply opened my arms. Sophia hesitated only for a heartbeat before running toward me. She fell into my embrace with a force that nearly knocked the air from my lungs. Her shoulders trembled as she held onto me as if afraid I might disappear again. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You came back." I closed my eyes, allowing the moment to wash over me. "I'm here now," I said softly. "And I'm not going anywhere." We walked through the garden together, just as she once imagined. She told me everything she had never been allowed to say, that she had never stopped loving me, that her choices had never been hers, that she thought I had given up on her. I told her the truth about who I really was, the life I lived quietly, and the world I had hidden for so long. Sophia smiled through tears. You never needed anything to impress me, Ethan. You were always enough. That single sentence lifted a weight I didn't know I still carried. The months that followed were filled with rebuilding, of the company, of trust, and of the future we had lost. Sophia found her strength again, rediscovering laughter, hope, and dreams she had once tucked away. The Langfords treated me with a sincerity I had never thought possible. And I learned something too. Forgiveness is not about forgetting the past, but choosing a future that allows healing. When peace finally settled over our lives, I reflected on everything we had survived, and in that reflection, I found the lesson I would carry forever. True worth is not measured by wealth, titles, or appearances. It is measured by character, courage, and the heart's capacity to love even after pain. A person who stands with honesty and kindness shines brighter than any fortune. Our fall had been painful, but our rise was built on truth. And that truth, at last, set us free.